And this morning, jurors in the Daniel Penny subway chokehold case will deliberate now for a second day.
So they're trying to decide if Penny, who's a Marine veteran, should be held responsible for the death of Jordan Neely. So with us right now to talk more is criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona. So thank you so much for being here. We should also note that you also served as a prosecutor as well. So you've seen both sides of this. So thanks again for being here this morning. First, let's talk about pretty much everyone is familiar with what happened. Jordan Neely, emotionally disturbed on a train. Daniel Penny allegedly puts him in this chokehold, which leads to a fatality. So what exactly is the jury deciding then?
So the jury has been charged with manslaughter in the second degree as well as criminally negligent homicide. But even before they get to the charges, they have to decide whether Daniel Penny was justified in using deadly physical force against Jordan Neely, because there's no question about it. Placing him in a chokehold for 5 to 6 minutes, that is deadly physical force. So the way that it was presented to the jury by the prosecution, also by the defense was claiming that, number one, you don't even get to justification because they are debating the causation, the cause of the death of Jordan Neely. According to the defense, Jordan Neely didn't die as a result of the chokehold. Instead, it was a combination of drugs in the system, of his sickle cell anemia, of his schizophrenia, and how he was having a bad reaction to all of this. So if the cause of death isn't the chokehold, then you have to find him not guilty of both the homicide charges, because you don't have a homicide. On the other side, you have the prosecution saying, of course, the cause of death was this chokehold for so long. They had the medical examiner testify, and also you see it with your own eyes, the lifeless body of Jordan Neely. But aside from that, once you decide that causation was the chokehold, was he justified in using deadly physical force against a man that was unarmed, that wasn't an imminent threat to anyone, and that at the point that he was choking him for that long, there was no one else on the train. It was just those three people and some onlookers. Like, Jordan Neely wasn't even moving.
So you've laid out the criminal negligent homicide charge and the manslaughter and their differences here, but the jurors then asked for a definition of those two charges. What kind of insight are you going to glean from their asking for more specificity about those charges as they deliberate?
So we're reading tea leaves, right? Because we don't know what those 12 jurors are discussing in the jury room. And you don't know whether it's just one juror that has that question. Is it two? Is it five? Or is it all of them that had the same question? But what's important, what I can read, though, from that question is that they're not asking or debating causation. Or it's possible that they put it on the back burner, because you don't get to justification. You don't get to the charges if you don't determine the causation. So I think that's a bad sign for the defense, because they're not buying your argument about the cause of death. But in terms of justification, now they have to look at whether Daniel Penny was justified. Was there an imminent threat? Did he have to hold him for that long? Because when you're talking about justification and taking the life away from another person, a human being, you're giving them a free pass for what they did.
Yeah. Do you think there's a race factor in this case?
I think that's the unspoken conversation. So I was in a courtroom doing opening statements, doing closing arguments, and doing some of the testimony. So interestingly enough, no one addresses it out loud. But it's gleaning in the courtroom. It's gleaning throughout the trial. It's gleaning through the video. It's gleaning when you have conversations behind closed doors, but it's not being addressed. They gave a one-liner to the defense. This is not about race. You know, we don't actually know. But what we do know from the videotape statement from Daniel Penny is that he dismissed Jordan Neely throughout this whole incident. At no point did he exercise any remorse or ask, how is he doing? You know, what's going on? And once he let go of the chokehold, he didn't even bother to check for a pulse or to see if he's okay, or ask for medical treatment, or call 911 to get an ambulance here. So possible, but not stated. He's not charged with a hate crime. Let's be clear.
Do you think it would have made a difference for Penny's defense had he testified?
So this is a difficult issue. Usually in justification and self-defense cases, you don't get that charge if you don't testify, because only you can tell the jury what was in your mind and why you took the actions that you did, why you reasonably believed that you had to use deadly physical force to take the life away of another individual. But in this case, he didn't testify. Instead, what the prosecution did was use his statements on the scene with the body-worn camera that was recording what he was saying, which wasn't much. He said, I took him out, and the videotape statement. The problem with the videotape statement is that Daniel Penny, he spewed various lies. He said, I let him go, and the two other guys were holding on to him. And when I let him go, he was still alive. He did not know that there was video of the actual incident, so he would not have been able to explain the lies. His credibility would have been at issue. So also, he would have been vulnerable to cross-examination. There's no control in cross-examination.
Just real quickly, his sister testified about his character, saying that he was basically a calm, decent human being. But also, he's a Marine. Does that have an effect, you think, on the jury?
It has a huge effect. I think an emotional effect, unspoken effect, where probably these jurors are thinking, we don't want to send a Marine to jail, especially when he was trying to help others. And let's be clear, at the initial incident, he was justified in the sense of holding Jordan Neely. But the problem is he went too far for way too long. But also take into account, with him being a Marine during the trial, it was used against him because they used his training against him. Because of his training, because of the training with having to use the different chokeholds and restraints, they're like, he should have known or been aware of the risk of death when he was placing his arm on the neck of Jordan Neely. So that was used against him.
All right, Bernarda, thank you so much for coming in.
Yes, thank you for having me.